Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you, Tora observant believers, to thrive as peculiar people in the modern world. And we do that by interviewing people like you who are doing awesome things in the world and or who have a crazy testimony to share. Today's is no exception. We're interviewing Susan Booth, who works for Azure Standard and who was diagnosed with cancer and had a 9-inch tumor in her stomach, and how she eventually got that killed off and then removed. Even after the cancer's removed, she started in scans seeing it return, and how she worked with a homeopathic doctor to figure out what supplements she needed to stave off any future cancer events. And it's been 3 years for her, no cancer. This episode of the Life Podcast is sponsored by Tora Sisters Magazine. This community, it's chock full of teachers, teachings, theological resources. But Amy has done something that no one else has. She has created a lifestyle magazine for women who love Yeshua. And the point of this lifestyle magazine is to encourage you and inspire you to live out the whole word. What's inside? Spiritual insights to encourage you in your faith, biblically clean recipes, moon phase calendars, so you can fill in the Hebrew calendar that you keep, crafts, DIY, homeschooling, parenting, time management, organization. All of this advice comes from women who are living the same way you are. You'll get a new issue every other month, and the content is evergreen. You're going to want to reference it for years to come. Give yourself or a woman you love the gift of a subscription to Tora Sisters Magazine and put in code LIFE to get $5 off the first issue. Life is short. Get something that actually matters to you. Get something that brings you joy. Get something that makes you want to get the mail. If you love what we're doing, please like this video, share this video, subscribe to the Life Podcast, give us 5 stars somewhere. It really helps the algorithm rank us up so people can see us and so more people can get these encouraging messages. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for watching. Without further ado, I give you Susan Booth. Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Life Podcast. We're so happy to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
So you have an intriguing, mind-blowing, kind of miraculous story, and I think we should just start right in the crux of it. Tell us how you felt when you were diagnosed with cancer. How'd you feel?
I actually wasn't diagnosed with cancer until I was about to die from it, which is really weird because it started out as what I thought were gas pains, and they went on for days, and then I discovered a lump in my abdomen, and I thought that it was a bowel issue. And then I had other symptoms of, like, my legs started like being weak and hurting, and I couldn't talk as easily. And none of those symptoms went together to indicate to me that, oh, this is cancer. And so I treated it as if it was a bowel issue. When I started missing work because I was in pain, and my coworkers said, what do you think's wrong? And I said, well, maybe appendicitis. And they said, well, if it's appendicitis, you better get to the hospital or something. And I was like, I've been putting up with this pain for a couple of months now, so probably not. And so they encouraged me, and I went to the local little clinic here to get it checked out. By then, the tumor was large enough that you could, like, put your hand on it. The egg-sized little thing that I felt in there originally had gotten that big. And the local doctor there at the clinic, he said, well, let's send you in for an ultrasound. I think it's just a uterine fibroid. So I said, okay. Went in for the ultrasound. They came back saying, yeah, we think it's probably a uterine fibroid. So he said, I think that if you just go have a hysterectomy, you'll feel 1,000% better. I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. And so I started with natural methods because that's the way I do it. trying to find ways to get rid of a uterine fibroid. I essentially wasted a month working on that because it didn't work. I guess I have a uterine thyroid, but maybe it's this big, you know. It was not the problem. So by the time I actually got an MRI that was extremely painful to go through, because by then I couldn't lay flat on my back. I was in so much pain that I couldn't sleep through the night. I was like getting up in the middle of the night trying to, take baths and showers because that was the only thing that seemed to ease the pain. And so I work at Azure Standard. David Stelzer is my boss, the CEO and founder. At the time, I was his executive assistant. And I think he kind of started realizing something was up when I started, calling him super early in the morning on Sunday mornings saying, I'm in so much pain, should I go to the hospital, kind of a thing. But his wife, Kimberly, she got me in touch with Invita Medical Centers in Arizona, where her own dad had been treated for stage 4 prostate cancer and was successful there. And so I had an MRI. They said, well, we can't, diagnose this without a biopsy or something, but we think you have cancer and we think that it's very bad. They wanted me to go to a local oncologist place. I say local, 3 hours away, And so I decided to go to Invita before I was even diagnosed. And at this time, I was even throwing up water. And I was completely dehydrated by the time I got there. The first thing they did is try to find a vein and get some fluid in me. And at that point, so I was probably, could be within weeks of dying. And yet I had not been diagnosed at that point. So no, I didn't have that classic, oh, I've got cancer. No, I kind of figured maybe I did because, yeah, but really I had done so much study on cancer and I believed that cancer was preventable, treatable, no problem. Even if I have cancer, we'll just deal with it, no problem. So I didn't have that fear. The only word that really did scare me was the word tumor. That was the word that I couldn't want to say. I could say cancer all day long. Let's talk about that. But a tumor? That was really difficult for me to, So yeah, by the time I got to Invita, the tumor in my abdomen was, I think it was like 19 centimeters. And then within the week or so that I was even there getting, the first stuff, it actually grew to 23 centimeters. So I looked 7 months pregnant. And all that before the official diagnosis.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Well, what did they do there? What happened at Invita? Tell us. You're still here. Thank goodness. You kind of scooped the whole story by being alive.
This is true. Well, hey, when you said right at the beginning, and I said glad to be here, I have said that more than once. I am glad to be here, thankful, grateful. The Lord, yeah, really had a plan somehow for me to go through everything that I went through in order to bring hope to others. Because yes, when I hit the very bottom of the bottom, he helped. He made sure that I had everything that I needed along the way. And I kind of feel like because of everything that I went through, I am able to help and empathize with other people going through similar problems because I went through so many. Because with the combination of the complications of the cancer, I ended up with dealing with cancer, dealing with a major heart problem that nearly killed me, dealing with a bowel blockage that nearly killed me, ending up with a colostomy, and then being able to even find the answer to that and being able to get that reversed. So it makes it so that even if a person has a heart problem, well, yes, I have been in cardiac ICU. I know what that feels like. And after I've looked at the whole picture, it's like, Yah really did want me. He was using me to be able to understand and then give everybody hope. And that's, you know, I don't want to say that God did it to me, shall we say. But instead, when I put myself in his service and said, I will go wherever you send me, well, evidently he must have figured that I'd be able to help a lot of people if I experienced it myself.
Wow.
But
Man.
it was hard to go to Invita at the very first, even before I was diagnosed, because I really, really wanted Yah to just heal me, just do it. And it was a real struggle for me because in my work and in my philosophy and at my heart, I didn't want to go to what I considered the medical establishment. And so I purposely chose not to go down what I considered the cancer cattle chute path. And so as this was unfolding, that, well, Susan, apparently you're not just going to be healed in the blink of an eye. What are you going to do? And it was very difficult. I felt a little bit like I was having a lack of faith to go and search out treatment that was not just Yah's healing. And so I was looking for his guidance and his support to say, yes, you are doing the right thing. So there were several what I would call little miracles along the way that told me, yes, you're on the right path. One of them was that no one from my family at the time was able to go with me to Arizona for treatment. I had become so weak that I needed a wheelchair. So I was using a wheelchair, at the airport to get to my destination. And because nobody could go with me, I needed somebody to go. And so I called up Karen, one of my coworkers, and when she answered the phone and I started blubbering about, I need somebody to go with, she says, I will go. I will go. She said, God told me that I am supposed to go with you. And so it was something where, I said, oh, because we had pretty much decided if Yah does not make a way for me to go, then I'm not going to go. But for me to just ask the first person, and she says yes, and I will go. The next thing was, yes, we got the wheelchair, and I was a little bit worried about the TSA at the airport. Actually, I'm kind of a stay-at-home kind of a person generally. I hadn't flown since before 9/11. So all of the TSA stuff, came into play, and I hadn't flown. So I was worried about that. But it was amazing that at the Portland airport, here I was all nervous about this. I was in a wheelchair, I was sick, I was in pain. And the TSA agent found out, because I had to do the special stuff, you can't just go through the machines. And she whispered in my ear, she said, well, I've been diagnosed with liver cancer myself. And she said, and I expressed that I was worried about this and stuff, and she said, here, let's pray. I will pray with you. So for the TSA, which everyone, wants to say, oh, they're the wicked, terrible, this is, but for the TSA agent herself to pray with me, I'm like, there's something different about this trip. That I'm feeling like this is a token for good, that I'm going to be blessed here. And then when I did get to Invita, and you walk into the lobby, they have a picture of Jesus there, and everyone is willing to pray with you. It is very very much centered on making sure that our Creator is part of the process of your healing. So even though they use their forms of, chemotherapy that they have, made so that it's ultra targeted and all these good things, it's still, they still use chemo. But to have that very Christian viewpoint at a place that, normal people would think, oh, this is just industrial medical stuff. It's not. And
This episode of the Life Podcast is brought to you by The Way documentary, The Truth, Reformation 2.0 Apologetics book, and Truth Tracks. The Way documentary tells the story of our movement. This is the story of people who were trading Easter ham for Passover lamb and Sunday church for Saturday Sabbath, all in an effort to live like their Savior. It dives into their stories through their own voices and into the history and theology that show how the church got to where it is today. The Truth, Reformation 2.0 is the only book of its kind, an all-encompassing theological treatise that answers every question a mainstream Christian might have about why you want to keep Torah. And finally, Truth Tracks are small comics, beautifully illustrated, that use stories and scripture to remind Christians that once we are saved by grace through faith, we are called to live and do the instructions of Yah, his Torah. If you want to learn more about any of these products, go to thewaydoc.com. That's theway, D-O-C, like documentary.com.
It seems like that might be a struggle for a lot of people who are diagnosed with some incurable disease. They say, I want to pray and I want Yah to heal me. And I understand, yes. And sometimes it seems that he does, and sometimes it seems that he doesn't. And that would be difficult to figure out, Mm-hmm. It seems like...
I heard a theory once, and I don't know if it's true, because I don't know God in that way. I don't know how he thinks, But I heard a theory once that the people who get instant healing are those that need to believe. They need to be drawn to him. They need to say, oh, this is real. And those that don't get instant healing may be those that already believe. And he says, instead of just healing you outright, I want to teach you my ways. So you're sick. Your body, things have happened so that your body isn't acting the way I want it to, the way I designed it to. Now I need to teach you how to make it work. And I feel like that's really what's happened with my story, because I went through essentially what I would call emergency treatment at Invita, where they were able to squash it down. But you squash it down, and then the body, as Yah created it, needs to be able to come back and say, I'm going to make sure that stuff never comes back. And the body itself, as he designed it, keeps it away and handles it. And that is important to learn. And I think I did learn that through this experience.
Can you tell us a little bit about Invita and what their approach is, and what at least their approach was with you? And can you walk us through the process your experience there? The
first thing that I guess I was pretty amazed at, but I didn't know how amazing it was until later, which came on later in the story. But when they first diagnosed me with cancer, and they were talking about the cancer and stuff, and I had to ask them, I said, so when my friends ask me what kind of cancer do I have, I said, what do I tell them? Because I was confused, what kind of cancer is this? They said, well, it's neuroendocrine carcinoma. Never heard of that one. But I didn't ask what my prognosis was. They didn't tell me what my prognosis was. And later on in my story, when I, had the heart problem and stuff, it came up that the medical establishment people, they needed a prognosis for me. And Invita refused to give them one. because they said it is not for us to say when God says your time is. We don't have any control over that. We don't know. We're not going to guess. It's in God's hands, not ours. And they stand by that, and they don't give a prognosis. And because I hadn't been to other doctors, nobody else had looked at it, I just figured, well, okay, I've got a tumor. We're going to get rid of it. I didn't know what stage it was. I didn't know what my prognosis was. I just know that I was going for it. The Lord put me here. We're going to make it. We're going to make this work. So, and science and research proves that when you have a prognosis and someone is told, well, it looks like you've got 6 months to live, a lot of times that is how long they will live, because it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I would say that even though it's a minor thing, maybe in the whole big picture, to me it was major that they didn't give me a prognosis and wouldn't give a prognosis, because it is God's timing. But yeah, as far as what they do there, it's actually pretty phenomenal. So, for example, chemo is one of the things that they do use, but they don't use it at all like conventional uses it. What they have is GTF. Chemo stands for genetically targeted fractionated, but it's essentially low dose chemo. And the reason why they can give you such a low dose is because it's targeted. And how they do that is the way cancer cells work is they love sugar. So this is why they tell you, oh, don't eat sugar if you don't want cancer, you don't want to feed it. But these cells love sugar so much that when you have a PET CT scan, they can actually inject, like, don't quote me, I think it's radioactive sugar type stuff. It goes in there, and because the cancer cells love to soak that all up, it soaks up all that stuff and it shows up on the PET CT scan. Well, it's using the same thing with this low dose chemo, is that if you take all of the chemo drug and you send it in with some sugar, it's almost like a Trojan horse where the cancer cells will gobble up that sugar, and then they will gobble up the chemo at the same time. So it's a two-step piece where they actually test your blood. They actually send it off somewhere to test your blood against every single chemo drug to see which chemo drug your cancer will be susceptible to. They find out exactly which one is going to kill it, and then they lower your blood sugar using insulin. They get it really low so that you're starting to be like, oh, I think I'll go to sleep here, and I don't know, I don't feel so good. Get your blood sugar so low, put in that targeted chemo that they know is going to work on it, put it with some sugar, it rides the sugar and goes right into those cancer cells and does not go to the rest of your body. And I know it's true because one of the drugs that they used for mine is a really heavy-duty drug called doxorubicin. And I found out later that doxorubicin is one of the chemo drugs that makes your hair fall out. And because this was low dose for me, I got perhaps only 10% of what they normally put into somebody when they get doxorubicin as a chemo drug. That 10% apparently went directly to the tumor and to the cancer cells, was completely absorbed by those. So none of it went to my scalp and my hair didn't fall out.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's just one of their tools. Just one of their tools.
Did you ingest it, the sugar mixture, or did they inject it? Or neither?
All of that is intravenous. So I actually had a port on my right shoulder, and the port was used for injecting that stuff, so they wouldn't have to find a vein every time I went in. You actually have a port, they install it. And Invita's way of treating cancer is not typical. I can't speak for what other people go through at their cancer treatments, but from what I understand, most chemos, you get some, and then you wait 3 weeks, 6 weeks, something, and then you come back for a whole nother big dose. Whereas what they do there, I lived in Scottsdale for about 6 months, and that meant every single day going into their clinic for, 3 or 4 hours just for therapeutic IVs. So I got, therapeutic IV vitamin C, a special one that has curcumin in it. They would use what they called oxybosh, where they actually take your blood and go oxygenate it for you and put it back in. And so, yes, this is all done through that port, so you really just don't feel it. It's all. There was some stuff that was oral, but most of that was things like herbs, because they did have it on a supplemental nutritional type thing. But because I went down there at a spot when I was not able to hold down water, and I had lost a tremendous amount of weight, couldn't walk, couldn't even get myself out of the car by myself, couldn't stand up out of a chair by myself. I had to have people help me up out of a chair just to get around. I was actually on TPN. So TPN is total parenteral nutrition, and it's where every night, big white bag of fluid that had all the nutrition in it that I needed, and that fed me. So I was not hungry. I actually, I was on TPN for about 3 months, and that gets, would just get into my system every night, flow into my veins every day at night. And so being fed totally intravenously, I think that it saved my life in one aspect, because that way I didn't have food going through my system. Because if I had tried to eat and I had gotten a bowel blockage, which was, hey, you've got this tumor that big in your abdomen, how does the food get through? If I had had a bowel blockage, that would have killed me. Because normally with a bowel blockage, they do surgery, they fix it. But Invita, the very first thing that they tried is, hey, let's just see if we can get that tumor out. Let's just remove it. Let's just do the surgical thing. And so they found the best surgeon in Arizona and said, hey, will you try? And he tried. He opened me up, and it was so vascular, meaning that he just would touch the tumor and it would bleed. And he says, I am afraid that if I were to try to remove this tumor, you would bleed to death on the table. And so he sewed me back up and said, unresectable, this cannot be removed. And so therefore, if I had had a bowel blockage that needed to be fixed, they wouldn't have been able to go fix that either. I would have just died of the bowel blockage rather than the tumor.
Because they couldn't get around the tumor to fix the bowel blockage. I mean, they couldn't have. Okay. Whoa.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason why. So family and friends, when they found out what kind of tumor I had, how big it was, the fact that it was unresectable, yes, everyone else was looking at the prognosis that Dr. Google gave them, and pretty much everybody was pretty scared that I was within 2 to 6 weeks of dying, and everyone made preparations for that.
How big is 23? Did you say millimeters or centimeters? Centimeters.
She says it's 9 centimeters.
Oh, 9 inches?
She's listening. 9 inches.
Great. I'm glad she figured that out for us. Wow. Well,
good.
That's big.
But yeah, and so my first caregiver there, she dubbed it baby watermelon. That didn't feel good to me, but it was accurate description, baby watermelon, because it was that big.
So, okay, all right. So you're going through all this intravenous treatment. You're eating intravenously. You're eating nothing actually. Like,
I'm trying to sometimes, but I would just throw it back up.
wow. So, man, seems like you were saved from that as well.
So the other things that they did work with, so I ended up having radiation, but radiation was targeted. So they actually did a map of the tumor based on everything and made it so that the radiation did not burn the skin. It didn't do anything. It was just there on the tumor. And that did, after several weeks, it did help the pain reduce, and it did make it so that the tumor quit growing. So that was, in my opinion, the thing that was able to just at least get it stopped so that it would not just completely take over and kill me that way. The
Did they cover you with lead things, like a lead blanket or anything, or no? They just kind of okay. I was thinking of getting X-rays as a kid.
No, I didn't know until afterwards that they had given me 3 tattoos. There's one tattoo in the middle and one tattoo on either side. They are just a pin dot of a tattoo. But what happens is that made it so that with their targeted radiation, they're able to put me in the machine the exact same place every single time to make sure that, your correct position this way, your correct position that way, and that way. That way every single time, because I had to go in there almost every day for another radiation treatment. And so that made it so that they knew exactly where it was. Now, I was very thankful that it was able to slow the growth of it. The people doing the radiation claimed that it would probably shrink the tumor by 50%. It did not. And it's known that with this kind of cancer, it doesn't do that. But it was as targeted as possible. But the intestines move. They move around with you. And they move with stuff that's going through them. And it's not like it's just, a solid plastic model like you see somewhere, like this is what your intestines look like and it's all solid. No, they move. And so what ended up happening is that radiation did burn and damage the intestines, so that later on, after I had pretty much overcome the cancer, I did start having bowel blockages because the intestinal wall had been burned and therefore was not resilient. And so therefore it would just twist because it had no integrity at that spot. And then it would get a bowel blockage. So that was part of the story later on. Before we get there though, the other piece that made a huge difference was embolization. Embolization is what they wanted to do early on, but they were afraid that if they embolized it, that it would turn into mush and my body and liver and kidneys wouldn't be able to get rid of the toxins fast enough and I would die from over toxicity. So they didn't try that first, but I think that it made a huge difference in shrinking the tumor later. Embolization is when they actually go in and stop up the blood supply to the tumor. So they go through a vein in your groin, go up, and because they've mapped out where the blood supply is going to that tumor, they beads, little beads to basically dam up the artery that feeds it. And so they put that in there and it stops the blood from feeding the tumor, because the tumor actually creates its own blood supply and just, yeah, starts taking all the nutrition from you, your body, and funneling it right into that tumor. So it's called cachexia. When you reach a stage where the tumor isn't just taking all the nourishment that you eat, but it takes all of the flesh on your bones. And so it takes away all your fat, all your muscle, everything. So that was the reason why I had become so weak. My arms became like little toothpicks. It basically was eating everything of me. It got to a point where I could not step up on a curb. Even that far, I didn't have the strength to do that.
Wow.
But embolization really, I mean, I think it's fantastic because they can do it with chemotherapy. Some of them, and it's a different process. It's called CIPI, CIPI. I don't remember the acronym for it. But that's where they basically do this embolization, but instead of just stopping up the blood supply with beads, they put chemo on the other side of it so that you kind of do both. You actually stick the chemo right where it belongs. And that is used to help with things like liver cancer. So I did have a CIPI procedure done later on my liver because, yes, I didn't know it at the time, but it had metastasized to the lymph nodes. It did metastasize to the liver, and they were able to take care of that too. So even though I didn't know it when I first went down there, it would have been considered stage 4 because it had metastasized. But they didn't scare me by telling me that. They just said, this is the name of your tumor, and we're going to help you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So when did it start to shrink, I guess, and was it from that procedure that you just described?
Yeah, when it started to, so the radiation got it to quit growing and quit hurting.
How long did that
And
take?
then the embolization.
How long did that radiation to quit hurting, at least? Was it weeks or?
I'd say maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Because when I first went in for radiation, just laying on my back was so extremely painful. I wasn't sure I'd be able to handle it. I had to make sure that the drugs that they had me on, I would time it down to okay, I know this takes effect at this time, so I'm going to take that drug at that time. Because when I was at home, I was just taking over-the-counter painkillers. When I got down there, then they gave me the heavy hitting ones that really help, and even they weren't quite strong enough. The heavy of the heavy hitters for painkillers was not really cutting it. So I would time it just right, and then I would get mad if they said that, well, we need to delay your appointment by an hour. It's like, no, you can't do that, But yeah, so just laying flat in there, because I couldn't lay down flat without it pulling so much that I was just uncomfortable. And they were able to, so I would say, by the end of a couple of weeks, it was like, oh, I can lay down in here now and not feel like this is so excruciating as it was at the very beginning. But the embolization, that really started getting it to shrink. And so I started noticing that, I could see over the bump after a while, because when you're laying down and like, okay, well, I can start seeing over it now because it was huge.
Wow. So, and that then just continued and it progressively shrank, or what else happened? Okay.
The tumor never did actually completely go away. The PET CT scans showed that there was no more cancer activity around the tumor. The tumor became dead. It was possible then for them or for someone to go in and remove the tumor because it was no longer vascular. It would not bleed. It was just a dead mass. And I don't know how big it was eventually, but it was much smaller and I was not in pain. And so it's just like having a, just a lump there. It wasn't bad. We went back to the surgeon who did the original trial to see if he could, let me see if I can open you up and take that out. And he said, nope, I won't touch her. Well, why? Because she didn't choose to do conventional therapy with me under my program. He said, because Susan chose to go back to Invita and do their program, even though you were successful, because Susan didn't do my program, I'm not going to touch her. So we went round to all of the other, surgeons in the Phoenix area. I visited one in particular and said, well, hey, can you take my tumor out? And he says, well, if so-and-so won't, and he is the best in Arizona and he is our mentor. He's the one that we all learn from. If he won't do it, we won't either. So essentially, I could not get a person in Arizona willing to try to take out my tumor. So I heard of a place in Texas that would take dead tumors out. But I was like, I don't want to go to Texas. I said, I'm sure, because I live near Portland, Oregon, I'm sure that somebody in Portland would be willing. Then I can just go home. Once I get home, I can just, shop around, see if somebody would be able to take it out. Prayed that the Lord would show me who I should go to. And so I just, when I left Arizona, left Invita, I still had the tumor, but it was technically dead. But then, yeah, that was the second part of the story where I had to get it removed.
And so did they do anything else to kill it, or was that was pretty much, those were all the things?
I think you would say that those were the only things. Everything else was what you might call supportive, integrative, having a couple of days of antioxidant therapy, where what they put in your IVs is antioxidant. And then on opposite days would be oxidant days, where they would put oxygen to it, because cancer does not thrive in an oxygen-rich environment. It does better without oxygen. So you put oxygen to it, and that will help kill it. But then at the same time, the antioxidant, you don't want to oxidize the body and make it rust, so it has to be in balance. And so they were monitoring that every day. So I would say that some of their other therapies aren't necessarily killing it. They might be killing it, but supportive.
Keeping your body strong while they did the other interventions.
Mm-hmm. The other piece of this puzzle that was kind of difficult is that during this time, the body is trying to handle it, and so it pulls in a whole lot of water. And I guess partly the tumor itself starts putting off its own water. It has its own ecosystem. It's almost like it's a living thing and that it needs to pee too. I don't know. But and so what happened soon after I got to Invita is that I started gaining a whole bunch of water weight, and I got edema. And there's a specific kind of edema that happens with cancer. It's called lymphedema. And essentially, I started filling up with water all the way up to my waist. So that's part of the reason probably why I felt so weak and couldn't even get up, couldn't put one step up on a curb, because I had so much water. So normally for, my build, and I've usually been a fairly, thin person, never been obese. Normally my body weight, I'm 5'6", So I'm 5'6", normally weigh about 125-ish. I gained so much water that just in a few weeks, I got to be 163. And compare that to when when everything was gone later, my lowest body weight during the experience was 96. So to go from in 1 year to be at 163 and 96 in the same year, those were the extremes of it. But I had so much water that, my legs were tree trunks. I felt like I was, like when I'd walk around, it felt like I had two volleyballs, between my legs because it's just that much water. So that was something that needed to be fixed and solved. And normally what normal medical people do is prescribe Lasix. Lasix is a diuretic that just makes all of the water just dissipate out of your system. You just pee it out like everything. But what I found out, and here this is another miracle that Yah put the right people in the right place to help me, learn about someone. It's right next door to Invita. Melanie Gabriel, she does manual lymph drainage and specifically is able to rub the edema right out of your body. Using the lymph system to rub it right out. Most people, having a tumor that big made it so that your lymph nodes are compromised in your abdomen. And so she had to find another way to get the lymph to go up from the legs and around to actually get it to come out. But we were able to talk to, doctors at hospitals and at Invita and all this to say, hey, Lasix is not healthful. It actually just takes the water out. But lymphedema that has to do with cancer actually has protein in the liquid. And if you just use a drug like Lasix, it'll take the liquid out and leave the protein, and you'll end up with these unsightly globular cellulite type things on you. And so after I had graduated from a wheelchair to a walker, and I was starting to get well, I complained to Melanie that was doing the manual lymph drainage. I said, my hips are kind of wide. I said, I don't think that my hips should be so wide that I can't squeeze into between the walker. What is this stuff that's on the side of my hips? She says, oh, that's the protein that didn't come out with the Lasix that they did give me at one point, or several times. And so she was able to, using her special techniques, rub that protein out as well and literally push that out, and blub, 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 on each side, it just turned into mush and comes out. Natural is way better. So after that, I would, as much as possible, refuse the Lasix and just have somebody manually push that out using manual lymph drainage.
Wow,
It's amazing.
I've never heard of any of that. It's so amazing. Whoa, you don't think about all of these side things happening. You just think, or at least I never do. I think of, there's a tumor, it has cancer in it has to be dealt with. But it sounds like as it's being dealt with, even if it's being done as natural as possible, there's all of the collateral damage or difficulties or whatever you would call them. And
well, and this is something that I'm glad that you haven't heard about this, because hopefully this means that you're hanging out with, really healthy friends and, they're not telling you these stories, But so two things came to mind here. One is apparently the fact that I had been eating an all organic diet was already really healthy. All of my organs were healthy. I just happened to have this situation where something got a hold and the body couldn't handle it. But the ease of which that fluid came out of me was much easier because my lymph system wasn't clogged up with gunk of all that garbage that most people eat. And so evidently going into this as a healthy person really helped me to get well quicker because I didn't have all those toxins from all the junk that most people eat. So it became clear that even if you feel like, oh, well, Susan, you were eating organically and you still got cancer, so what's the point of eating healthy if you're just going to get cancer anyway? Well, no, the experience was that much better because I was healthy. And I didn't have to have all of the other terrible stuff that comes along. The other piece of that is that it is not exactly my mission. I have a different mission, but it is something that I think is important, that cancer treatment and talk about cancer treatment should not be something that is kind of this secret thing where, oh, this person got cancer, we're afraid they're going to die. Let's like push them over in this little corner, not ask them about it. Maybe when they get done with their cancer treatment, they'll come back and we can talk to them. But we really don't want to know what happens behind closed doors. You know, I think people need to know what these treatments are. So that water that built up in my system, it actually started going around my lungs. And it wasn't in my lungs. It wasn't water in the lungs, but it's water in the sac that the lungs sit in, I guess. And so I was unable to breathe easy because it was filling, the water was filling up the chest cavity as well. And it was kind of funny because I couldn't stay in a bed. I was in a recliner, even at night. They wanted to have my feet up as much as possible to, drain that edema. And then I couldn't lean back because I couldn't breathe. So here I am, like a V, trying to sleep and live like that. But what they ended up doing is, in order to get that fluid off of my lungs, they actually did what they call a thoracentesis. They actually put catheters in your back between your ribs that go into that cavity where your lungs sit, and they actually either pump out or vacuum out the liquid that's in there. And so I say pump or vacuum. Pump, they actually, put the catheters in there and they have a machine that just pulls it out. The other way, which I actually preferred, was that they have a vacuum bottle and it's real quiet. There's no pump, and it just, because it's a vacuum bottle, it just naturally pulls the liquid in there. The first couple of times that I did, I'd get like a quart off of one lung and nearly a quart off the other lung. And it looked a little bit like apple cider vinegar when they pulled it out, But I had that done, I don't know, I'm going to say probably 5 times. I was able to start telling them when I needed it because I knew what it felt like when I started, well, I can't breathe. I think I need to have you drain that again. And then got to be a bit of an expert on telling them how to do it because it's uncomfortable. But I was able to start telling them, well, this is what's uncomfortable. I'd rather do it this way. And I'll tell you when it's done, because if they take too much water, then they risk your lung collapsing. And so when they do this, you start this feeling of, not just a feeling, but you start coughing uncontrollably. And you've got to be able to make sure that you don't go beyond that point where your lung collapses. So, but yeah, when you have it done, half a dozen times, you start saying, oh, this is the way this works.
So why were you retaining the water in the first place? Did you already say that, or did they know why?
I think it's just a result of the cancer itself. That it itself is kind of just oozing out its fluids as it does its own, as it's taking your body, your proteins, your fluids in and building itself up into its own little thing, that it does have its own byproducts and whatnot. That and the body, the lymph nodes become enlarged, or in this case, the cancer had metastasized to the lymph nodes, and so therefore they're not functioning like they should. But yeah, I don't know. That might be a question for Dr. Monzo. Dr. Monzo might be able to tell us why and how that works.
So to continue linearly in the story, if I remember right, the tumor now is dead for all intent and purposes. No one will operate on it. Was there anything else that we missed there? Like what about, you said it metastasized to lymph node and maybe liver, I can't remember. And so this tumor's dead, but now it sounds like there were other cancer sites. What did Invita and what did you do about that? And did you do it there, or did you do it after you got back to Portland area?
So the places on the liver, that was where they used that CIPI procedure, CIPI, where they actually, it wasn't just an embolization, but they actually put the specific chemo into that exact part of the liver. And because the liver has 2 nodes and it regenerates itself, they were able to just put it into one of the nodes and have the liver, the liver was able to still function while that was being handled. So yes, they were able to take care of that too while I was there. The part of the story that was, I felt like at the end of the day, it was almost as big as the cancer itself, as far as a problem and as far as how much it affected me in my life, was technically not anything to do with the cancer or with Invita or anything. It was just a complication of trying to solve the problem. So I was on TPN. They were giving me all of my nutrition by IV. What would happen there is they would test my blood to say, okay, this is how much of these different minerals your blood needs. They would send it to a company that makes these bags of stuff, and they would put into the bag exactly what I needed, this much potassium, this much, of each of the minerals to make sure that my electrolytes stayed right. Also, that drug that I was telling you about, the doxorubicin, that's a really heavy hitter, it can have an effect on the heart, and it can damage the heart. So what happened was, and we don't really know the cause, but I ended up having what they call PVCs, premature ventricular contractions in the heart, which makes it kind of feel flip-floppy, and what they call bigeminies. Bigeminies is when every other heartbeat is less than it should be. So they're both heart arrhythmias. And that tells you about another therapy that they did. They have a therapy called apheresis. Apheresis is a blood cleaning thing. So after they've been hammering all of these cancer cells and getting them cleaned out and they're dying, apheresis is something that they hook you up to a machine. Your blood goes into the machine. It cleans your blood, and most people feel all better when they get done. So I was planning to have this, and I got in there, they tested my pulse, and my pulse came up at 40. And they were like, we can't go ahead with this. Something's not right. So my caregiver at that time, Gloria, she had just left. And I called her up and I said, I've got this problem. They're not going to do the procedure because my pulse is only at 40. She came flying back, came in there. And this is one of those, it's just a beautiful story. It gives me goosebumps. she found her way into the room, came in, I guess they let her in. And I had the little heart monitor thing on your finger with the pulse, and she looked at it, and sure enough, it said that it was only 40. And she said, let's pray about this. So she knelt down there right in front of me, in front of the recliner where I was set up to do this, and she started praying. And as she started praying, it was amazing because the pulse came up and up, just so that it was 80, which was approximately normal for, what I was dealing with at that time. And we were just flabbergasted that this, just praying about this would make it so that it would normalize. And I think that that was a real faith builder for her, to see that, you pray about something and there's an answer to prayer right there. So, but this, of course, alarmed everybody because, this is a problem. And so I got, sent to different hospitals for, observation and, checking the things. Everything came up normal. Every time I'd go in the hospital, my heart would just even out and be okay. So a couple of weeks later, they did another apheresis. This time my heart stayed where it was supposed to. And yes, my blood got cleaned out. They even showed me the bag of fluid that they were able to, get out of it. And sure enough, you can see what looks like little fishies in there where the gunk from your blood has come out. It was just amazing. So I was all intrigued with that. But what happened was, as soon as I got done with that, I nearly fainted. Even though I was still in the wheelchair and this and that, I remember them putting something under my nose, trying to get me to, come to or whatever. But everything seemed okay. I went home. This was a different caregiver. And that evening, she was arguing with the night caregiver, because I had both day and night, different ones, so that different people could get sleep. And they kind of had this argument about religion. And I was like, oh, The bag of TPN fluid was probably not set correctly for the blood that had just been cleaned. So the electrolytes were probably different. That particular caregiver probably did not set the right machine thing with it. The next morning at 4 a.m., I woke up with a very weird sense of panic and heart feeling strange. I was having a ventricular tachycardia electrical storm, which is basically a different kind of heart attack. She didn't call 911 until she couldn't feel a pulse. And so that was about 7 o'clock. So I endured this ventricular tachycardia for probably 3 hours. And they got me to the hospital in an ambulance. They got everything stabilized without using the paddles. I got transferred by helicopter to another hospital that was able to help me out. Was in cardiac ICU for several days with an ejection fraction of 25. Anything below 40 is considered heart failure. Normal is like up 60, 65. They wouldn't let me out of the hospital. Sorry. They wouldn't let me out of the hospital unless I had either an ICD, which is a pacemaker defibrillator, or I had to have some jacket that would do that for me, but I would need to rent this jacket that would do it for me. I couldn't take a shower the entire time I had it. And there wasn't going to be one available for 3 months. And even if there was one available, they would only rent it to me for 3 months. And so the idea of putting in this defibrillator, I had no idea that a pacemaker defibrillator actually has leads that actually go and screw into the heart. I didn't know this. I just figured that it was something that, helped make the electrical on the outside of the heart. I didn't know, but it actually screws into the heart. But I didn't think that I had much of a choice. They didn't give me much of a choice. And this is where this gal came in, and this is where the prognosis became important. She says, we think that you need an ICD, but you're a cancer patient. We're not going to give you this ICD to help your heart unless your prognosis is better than 50% that you're going to be living in 1 year after your diagnosis. And this was only 2 or 3 months after my diagnosis. And she basically asked me, why I thought I should live on this planet. What good are you? Why should we do this for you? And at first I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, wow, really? And then I realized that I was kind of in the salesmanship role of my entire life. I had to actually convince this person that I deserved to live. And so I launched into everything that I wanted to do in this life, how I really wanted to help people get well, how I, worked for Azure Standard. We wanted to help people find good health. I felt like I was on a mission to do this. If I could just get well and get back to it, I could do these things. And I did my best to sell myself as like, okay, I do belong on this planet, She came back later. She says, well, Invita would not give me a prognosis. She says, which is really annoying because we needed a prognosis. But she says, I went and I did a bunch of research, and I think I've figured out that I could make a case for you that you have a 51% chance of surviving 1 year past your diagnosis. So therefore, we are willing to put in this ICD. Phew.
Oh my gosh. They would be it's just wild that they would be unwilling to do this.
Well, hey, if I'm just going to croak, if you're just going to croak in a few months, why should we go ahead and, do all this trouble to give you an ICD? The cancer is going to kill you, so why should we, help you out with your heart? So they put in the ICD. I was fine. There was nothing wrong. I went through all of that stuff. Come to find out, and by then my brother was able to come, take care of me. He does mechanicking for part of his job. And he started looking at this and saying, well, we've got a problem here with the electrical of your heart. Let's figure this out. And he was hooking up my TPN, and he said, this isn't right. And he did find the new pump that they were supposed to have attached for me. And he said, I think, because as soon as I got home to the apartment condo we had, the problem came back, and the ICD was not helping it because it needed to go up to a certain amount, the bigeminis, everything. And that's not what a defibrillator pacemaker is for. It was just not working. So he figured out that, hey, it looks like your problem is this TPN. Something is wrong because the pump was supposed to be not putting the stuff in there as fast. It was supposed to go in slower. He did the mechanics thing and looked at it and said, this isn't right. And so by that time, I was able to eat more. And we decided that I'm just going to cold turkey go off a TPN. So I went off of TPN, and all of those problems, they didn't exactly clear up, but they got better. We went back to one of the doctors, and he says, "Oh, if you're better, that means we need to increase your medications." And there's a particular drug there, amiodarone, which helps stabilize the heart, but it's also something that can do very bad long-term damage. And he was like wanting to increase the dosage of that and everything. Here again, this was a miracle of Yah, because we were then able to find a different cardiologist that understood my desire to not only get off of drugs, but he said, yes, if you can pass all of my tests to prove that you've discovered the source of this heart problem, I will remove your ICD for you. And I can do it without open heart surgery, because what happens is those screws that screw into the heart, they get scar tissue around them. And if it goes too long, you can't just unscrew them, because the scar tissue is there, and you actually have to actually cut out the things in order to do it. So you actually have to cut them out of the heart. But he says, since it's been less than 6 months, as long as you pass all my tests, then I will remove it. So the tests were very interesting, because one of those tests was right before he took it out. He says, "I'm going to test your heart." With a computer, he was able to make the heart pound really hard and like go fast, and all these things. And he did this for half an hour, testing every possible electrical thing he could with the heart to see if my heart would do what it was supposed to. And it passed the test. So he took out the ICD and took out all the leads, and I was able to get all that out before I left Invita. It was amazing. That's one of the biggest happy dances I ever did, because otherwise I'd be stuck with an ICD for my whole life or else having open heart surgery, to cut those things back out.
Wow. My goodness gracious. How long between when you had that put in to your heart and then stopping the intravenous food and then getting it removed?
So I had the ventricular tachycardia attack on May 15. It's May 15. I came off of the TPN the 1st of June, and I had the ICD removed
So you
the
only
last
had it
week
in
of
for
August.
a couple months.
Yeah. But the thing with having those Bigeminis, it puts you down where you can't do anything. When your ejection fraction, the amount of blood that it's pushing out has been so low, and it has these arrhythmias, even just your body functions of just going to the bathroom would make it so that these things would kick in, and your heart would do these things to the point where, when you're going to the bathroom, you're like, oh, I need to lay my head down, because I think I'm going to faint from this, because when your heart really just is not pumping as much as it should. So it took a while to recover from that, and I did the herbs, the hawthorn, the cayenne, all those things are supposed to help get your heart working again. But so yeah, when I left Invita, rang the bell, came home. Yeah, I had this great big old patch over here, because they had taken out the ICD, and the ICD is like that big, and I was such a small person that it stuck out. And they joked, when I was there to have the test done for the cardiac thing, They put all these stickers all over you. And they said, well, Susan, you don't have enough real estate to put all of our stuff. And I was one of the only people that was able to actually just get on the table thing of my own accord, because they said most people that are there for cardiac reasons, they've got plenty of real estate, and a lot of times they are so big they cannot get themselves onto the table for this. So I was definitely the anomaly. And they said, Susan, the only reason why you survived that ventricular tachycardia attack is because you're young and because your heart was not diseased. They said most people would not have survived having their heart rate at 250 beats a minute for nearly 3 hours. They said most people are older, so when they have this problem, so their heart just simply cannot do that. It's not strong enough to do that. Or if they're younger, their heart is usually diseased and they're not healthy, and a diseased heart can't withstand 250 beats a minute for 3 hours. And that's the reason why my caregiver was not able to feel a pulse. The pulse was there, but it was at 250 beats a minute, and that's not something that your fingers can feel to feel a pulse. It was just going too fast to feel that.
It's so wild. I can't believe you survived all this. You're right.
Yah had a plan. That's the whole thing. He had a plan, and I'm living proof that yes, you can
was that the
survive
last
these
thing
things.
in Arizona that you experienced, and then you hit the bell, you came back, you still had the tumor? Is that where we are?
Kind of. This kind of leads into the next thing. Remember I was telling you about the bowel blockage piece. Well, after I was off TPN and I started eating well, and I was hungry, and my brother likes to cook too, and so we were doing this. I started getting pains that would come in waves, and I didn't know what it was, but they would go away. And then my dad died. And so after that, my mom was actually able to come and stay with me, because she had been having to stay with him at home and couldn't be with me. So she came to stay with me. She had just the week or so before been in the hospital with my dad when he died. She comes down to Arizona to try to take care of me, get me over the hump to, leave Arizona. The very first weekend when she's down there with me, I had a bowel blockage. I had to go to the emergency room because I was in such excruciating pain. We were taking Uber at the time. The Uber driver couldn't find the entrance to the emergency room. It was nutty. But yeah, bowel blockage, and they were able to get the bowel blockage to resolve on its own. They put what they call an NG tube down my nose, which that was another story, because I was able to, after getting NG tubes put down my nose enough, I learned how to do those. You have to have two people, have to have one person with the glass of water, and you have to drink with the straw, and the other person puts the tube down your nose. And one time it actually came out my mouth, and that's when I learned how not to do it. But my poor mom, to be in the hospital situation with my dad and then go directly into it with me. But what they were able to do, put that tube down in my stomach, pump out everything that was in there, and it just sits there and it pumps everything out. I mean, you even just, swallow your own saliva and it'll, stick it back out. And it was able to pump back out all of the garbage that was, stopping up the intestines. And so I was able to be okay.
And was the blockage from the twisted intestine from the radiation? Okay.
Yes. So then I rang the bell, came home. We're at that spot now. and I get another bowel blockage. So I'm at home now. It was the day after Labor Day, 2021, and I could not get this thing to resolve, no how. I went to the first closest hospital here, and they figured out that, oh, you just came back from cancer treatment. You just came off of all of your pain drugs. You're probably just wanting drugs. They didn't say that out loud, but they sent me home with 2 pain pills of oxycodone and said, you'll be fine, go away. We checked the x-ray. There's nothing wrong with you, except, you do have a tumor there, by the way, but, because it wasn't gone. And I was in excruciating pain because the pain of a bowel blockage is enormous. It is worse than the cancer pain. The cancer pain is something that just kind of goes on and on and on, but this was acute. This was like really, really bad. So my mom and my brother were out in the car waiting for me because this is COVID. Remember, all of this was COVID. They weren't allowed in the emergency room with me. And so I went back out to them and I said, I'm going to sit here in the car for about an hour. And I said, if the painkillers they gave me, these prescription ones, don't kick it, take me to the next town, because I know they've got a better hospital over there. So, yep, it didn't help. I went to the next town, which is Hood River. And here again, I think it is absolutely the Lord's blessing. The doctor that was on duty in the emergency room that night was also had just, gotten there from being on a team of stellar surgeons in Portland. She saw me. She looked at the stuff, the pictures. She says, yes, you have a bowel blockage. And she said, basically, we don't have enough blood in the gorge for you, in the Columbia River Gorge, this whole area. We don't have enough blood here to do this surgery. If that tumor is not dead as you claim it is, we don't have enough blood in the gorge. We have to send you to Portland. And so I went to Portland. We were unable to get the bowel blockage to naturally, do it. I said, well, give me an NG tube, suck the stuff out. They're like, you're the only person who has ever requested to have an NG tube put down their nose. But they tried. It didn't work. And so they were successful at giving me all the pain meds so that I was, comfortable again. And that weekend, because they had to get it all together, they didn't do emergency surgery. But that weekend, it's on Sabbath, they sent in a chaplain. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never had anybody send a chaplain before a surgery. And so I'm, prayed with them. It's a Catholic hospital, Providence, Portland. And I prayed with them and thought that was really nice. Then I really got scared when Sunday they sent in another chaplain. And I decided this time, I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to kind of turn the tables on this one because, this is kind of scaring me. But so I said, I'm going to pray with you. I'm going to pray for you because, so I prayed with the chaplain and, found out that this particular surgery was going to be huge. So sure enough, they were able to entirely remove the tumor. It was indeed dead. They did the pathology tests on it later. They found that there was 0 cancer cells in the entire thing. There was nothing there. It was absolutely dead. I made an agreement with them that they wouldn't remove any organs that weren't diseased because previously that previous surgeon, he wanted to do a hysterectomy while he was in there just because it's standard. I had to have an argument with him over that. But, I said, don't remove anything unless it's diseased. So they agreed. They ended up removing the one ovary that they could find. They couldn't find the other one. Probably the tumor ate it. Who knows? They removed almost half of my small intestine, almost half of my large intestine, half of my rectum and gave me, thankfully, just a colostomy. They could have given me an ileostomy as well, but that's basically where the ileostomy would be where the fluid from the small intestine comes out your belly and goes into a bag. Thankfully, I didn't have that. I had a colostomy, which means that it goes past that juncture that they had made and goes to another place so that it does not, your poop doesn't go out your rectum, it comes out the front of you and goes into a bag. And they told me that this would be permanent. They said that I would have to live with it. They also told me that in this surgical oncology ward, which is supposed to be just for cancer patients, they said that the vast majority of people that are getting colostomies are people that come in from Crohn's disease. And I found out that Crohn's disease, which I think is definitely curable with diet, and you can basically get well from it if you do the right things. But the modern American diet is just, it helps people get Crohn's. But the vast majority of people have this, and I found out that there is a huge number of people that have colostomies, even right now. You can meet them as everyday people and you'd never know that they had a colostomy because, yeah, you hide it under your clothes and, manage it. But, yeah, the number of colostomies being done in this country is out the roof because of Crohn's, not because of cancer. And I learned that there's a lot of people suffering with that and just don't know it. But yeah, so I spent almost 3 weeks in that hospital. It was a very difficult recovery, but I was successful. And I was not able to do very well with the colostomy bag itself because I found that one of the anti-cancer things that I wanted to do was take a lot of turmeric curcumin. It's very anti-cancer, and yet it made it so that the ostomy bag would not stick to me. And it's got to stick to you in order to be able to, direct the poop coming out to go into the bag and not all over you. And so I had a lot of trouble with that because I wanted to take that for anti-cancer purposes. And so I struggled with it. I wasn't able to gain the weight I needed to. I continually had diarrhea almost all the time. But they did a CT scan in December of that year, and there were enough little dots all over that they said, the oncologist that they assigned to me said, we'll just wait until those little dots get bigger. We'll wait till your cancer grows, and then we'll be able to biopsy those little dots, and then we'll be able to treat you for cancer again. I'm like putting 2 and 2 together and saying no. And then the blood test that I was doing is a CEA number that I watch. Come February, that number started to rise. And I'm like, uh-oh, this cancer is coming back. And I was trying to do everything I possibly could to keep this cancer from coming back. I had even, like Invita did IV vitamin C. So I was doing IV vitamin C here at the local place. Here again, that's another story though. When I did it locally, it made me feel cold, and I started getting blood pressure spikes to the point where I'd almost black out during the treatment. I'm like, this never happened at Invita. At Invita, I was able to get higher dosages of this, and it was like, no problem. What's the difference? I researched it and found out that Invita uses vitamin C from tapioca. All of these other places use vitamin C from probably GMO corn. And it made a huge difference. I could not handle this stuff. But anyway, I felt like this cancer was going to come back. I really did not want to go back to Invita, not because they're not nice people or that they're not, doing things right. I just wanted to prove that when a cancer is small like this, it can be handled God's way. Yah has a plan, and I really wanted to prove that that would work. So as we saw his plan unfold, I was able to be put in touch with a chiropractor acupuncturist remotely. I've actually never met him in person, just talked on the phone, talked on Zoom a couple of times. But he is into nutrition, and he has a track record of being able to help other people who are very, very sick. And so he was recommended to me. He says, no, I do not treat cancer. He says, I treat people. I treat the person. And he said, what we're going to do to help you is we're going to make sure that the body knows and has everything it needs to heal itself. And so a combination of herbs, enzymes, glandulars, homeopathics, bioenergetics, he was able to give me a whole bunch of supplements, give me some advice on a few other things. Within 2 weeks, those numbers dropped so that I knew that this was working. Within 6 weeks, the numbers dropped into the normal range. He asked me, he says, well, you're doing better. And I started feeling better immediately. Within 2 days, I was feeling better. He says, well, are you going to try to get your colostomy reversed? I said, well, no, they said that it was permanent. He says, well, Yah does not want you to live like this with your body not functioning the way he designed it. He says, you should at least go ask and see if you can get that colostomy reversed. I said, well, I'll try. So it was quite a few months out for Dr. Kylie. She's the one that put in the original for me. I got an appointment with her. We went in that summer to check it out, see if maybe she could reverse it. And when I was in her office, she says, you're not supposed to be here. She says, we didn't put that in there thinking that, you would be here for this. We were essentially, with your surgery, trying to just give you a few extra months of life so that you could go take care of what you needed to take care of, because you weren't done with life. You needed a little bit extra longer. But she says, but I'll look and see. So she tested a few things and, looked up where the sun doesn't shine to see what the rectum was like, to see if, she says, well, if you do all of these tests that I have, then I will try. The tests included a colonoscopy. The test was a colonoscopy, which turned out beautiful. This is great. And a head-to-toe CT PET scan, because they wanted to make sure there was not a speck of cancer in me anywhere, because that previous one, just the previous December, showed all these little spots. They couldn't find anything. Nothing. No cancer anywhere. So she agreed to try the surgery. She says, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, because by now there's all this scar tissue that's all built up and everything. But I'll try. She got in there. She was able to do it laparoscopically, which is basically just making holes in your, in your abdomen and fixing it that way without having to open you all the way up. She found 2 little pieces of something that she didn't know what it was, so she sent it immediately to pathology and said, is this cancer? They said, nope, that's just scar tissue. No cancer. Still no cancer. She was able to do that surgery, reverse it for me, and they marked it down as a painless surgery, because after the surgery itself, I think I had 2 doses of Tylenol, and that was it. And I got put back to normal. The scar tissue was going away, partly because of the enzymes and stuff that my chiropractor acupuncturist had given me. The body was healing itself. The body was going around healing all of these little spots so that they didn't come up. And I said, this is the way this needs to go. So I talked to David Stelzer at Azure Standard. We had the opportunity to private label some supplements. I said, I really want to be able to make these supplements that I'm getting from my doctor available to everybody. I want to make it so that more people can find a doctor like him. So we launched the AzureWell brand of supplements. No, it doesn't have all of the supplements in there that I used yet. I'm working on that, trying to bring them in one at a time. Find a source for them and make sure that we can bring them in. We've started a Find a Practitioner page on our website so that people can find doctors that use some of the same bioenergetic stuff that that he uses. That's what kind of put me in touch with the folks at Quest 4, and they put me in touch with Dr. Alfonso Manzo, which you've interviewed him before. And so just Lord's blessing, one day I had not heard from my doctor, and I said, well, if I don't hear from him right now, I'm calling Dr. Manzo to see what he has to say. That turned out to be a situation where he was looking for a brand to work with for nutritional supplements that he could have for his clients and his practitioners that he's growing under, with his Aleph Tav body system, so that his practitioners can benefit. And he offered to help us test all of our supplements to make sure that they are bioenergetically good and that they fit with his paradigm, make sure that everything is perfect, that everything is the way it's supposed to be. And it turned out to be a beautiful bringing together of exactly what we needed. And now, yes, we've had the AzureWell line for a year now, and we're at a spot where I really feel like I can tell people about my story and really say that it was successful. We found the answer. We know that for sure, when you do things the way our Creator designed the body to do it, you can get well. You can do this. And so even though I had to go through all of that stuff, it turned out that I think what he really wanted me to see, if Yah has a plan in all of this, he wanted me to see the best of the best that you can get in an emergency situation. And then after that say, okay, Susan, you've had a second chance at life. Now let me teach you how to nourish the body, give it what it needs, and connect you with all of these other people that are doing the same thing from their perspective. Like with Dr. Manzo, I didn't know about his Aleph Tav body system and the energy pathways that he talks about there. I have had very good success with acupuncture, and I could tell you stories about how, I had a stomach ache once. They put a needle right in the middle somewhere. The stomach ache went away like that. Just amazing stories about how that energetic system works very well. But then Dr. Manzo's thing of the Aleph Tav body system that is even deeper and really brings in the Creator God, the Torah, the Hebrew, what God's message really is for us. And that's why I've just been so happy that I've been able to do some podcasts with Dr. Manzo, and we're kind of starting to help educate more people that, yes, it is very important what you eat for whole foods. It's also very important what your energy is, and supporting that with healing modalities such as, anointing with oil and laying on of hands and all of these things that come together that I think Yah is just trying to show us and teach us that he has created a body that can do all of these things, and he just needs to teach us how. And that's the stage where I feel like I'm at now. I've been able to start connecting all these dots. And I would not have been able to connect those dots if I hadn't been through what I've been through. So some people might condemn me and say, well, Susan, you went and you had chemo and radiation and surgery. That's the thing that we're all against. And you actually, went on these terrible drugs, and yeah, you were on the morphine pump, and, you did all these horrible things. But yeah, I had a purpose. And to bring me through all that, bring me through that fire, shall we say, there's a purpose and there's a reason for it. And I've just put myself in as his servant and said, I want to do what you would have me to do. And actually, Luke, I have to quote you on this one. You have had an impact on me and how I view things. One of your interviews, I'm not sure which one, but in one of your interviews, you said that you want to be a tool so sharp in Yah's hands that he does not want to set you down. That is something that I have adopted. I kind of want to live by that one.
That's great. Me too. Hopefully we both will. It seems like you are. I should ask you about, well, I know there's more to say, but I should ask you about the supplements. And are you still on the same ones that you were on when you found out what would work? Or were you able to not take all of those for an extended period of time? And then also, how long has it been since all
so
this has
to
happened?
answer the question
the recovery, the full recovery
of the supplements, yes, I continue to stay on most of the supplements. I don't take as much of them, but I do stay on it. I do not think that there is ever going to be a time when I just, go back to just not any supplementation at all. But the nice thing about the bioenergetic testing that my doctor does, the bioenergetic testing from Quest 4, and that bioenergetic testing that Dr. Monzo is doing, is that you can actually test the body and create a very individualized, personalized thing. This is what your body needs right now. And that test will show you that, nope, you don't need as much of that anymore. Oh, this one over here, I don't think you need it. You probably need more of this one over here. And it's basically that, call it biofeedback, whatever it is, in that technology that the body is strong in truth and it's weak in lies. And when it's strong, it says, yeah, this is something that I want. And so through that bioenergetic thing, you're able to just ask the body what it needs and what it wants. And it, in Yah's great design, it will tell you. So you don't have to guess, should I take this or should I take that or whatever. Through this energetic testing, it says, this is what I need to get well. And as long as you take that, but you may need that for right now while it's working on a particular problem. Maybe it needs those building blocks of this particular supplement for a while. And then later on, it'll say, I've had enough of that. I need some more of this over here. So it is a continual thing of always individualizing what you need. To answer your other question, how long it's been. So as of this recording, it's been just over 2 years since I had the colostomy reversed. It's been just over 3 years since I rang the bell at Invita. And it's been just over 4 years since I probably should have been diagnosed because I was feeling the first symptoms. And another thing I should share, this is kind of fun. when I first got back from Invita and I had been to have my tumor removed and I had just gotten my colostomy and I was just venturing out for the first time in a while. I hadn't been out in public much. I was, still very fragile. I went to the fall feast here in Dufur. And the song that the choir sang that first day when I first went back to feast was, Lord, I'm thankful. It's the song where, like Daniel after the lions, like Noah back on dry ground. And it still gives me goosebumps because it was just perfect to step into that fall feast and have that song be sung by the choir. It was like they were speaking directly to me and didn't know it. But I figure that's how Yah was telling me that, yep, it's okay. And it was my response back to him, Lord, I'm thankful because I just came through all of that. And sure, that was before I had all this goodness of learning how to, do all this, but it was after the major trauma of all the major surgeries, all of that was behind me. And it was just, it helps me know that Yah really is looking out for me, even in the smallest thing, as to, have the choir at feast have a song that would encourage me on my first day back.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Your whole story is so beautiful.
Exactly.
And it's
thank the Lord every day.
Triumphant.
And that's why when you said at the beginning, and I said, glad to
Good
be here.
job.
Yes, I'm very glad to be here. And it does pain me that there are as many people that aren't here as could be if things were different. I don't know that I feel quite like survivor's remorse, when everybody else dies but you and you're like, why am I here? It's not quite like that. But there are so many friends that I made along this path that aren't here because they didn't discover this way of healing. And even now, people will question me on it. Well, just supplements? No, it's not just supplements. It's the whole thing. There's so much more. I recently read the book, Radical Remission, and there are so many different elements that come with getting rid of cancer and surviving against all odds. And a lot of it has to do with will to live. A lot of it has to do with your spirituality. A lot of it has to do with how optimistic you force yourself to be, how you find time every day to laugh, even if you have to just put on a comic video and watch it and just laugh, because it trains your body that you're supposed to be happy. And people have been able to come back from literally being in hospice because they've done all of these things, changed their diet, taken the supplements, made sure that they have a reason to live and that they have a connection. In the book, it wasn't particularly to the Creator God, but I'm saying that's a big, come on, this is where it's at. But then, finding the joy of the Lord, knowing that He is your strength. And people would ask me, they would say, Susan, why aren't you just jumping up and down, screaming at God to heal you? I told Yah that I needed healing. He knows it. And I don't have the strength to hop up and down and yell and scream. I just, need Him to help me out here. And He did. He did.
For someone that hasn't been, they're just seemingly healthy and they're eating organic like you were, and everything seems to be fine. What would you tell them? Like, what would you recommend to them to make sure that they don't find themselves in that situation? Is there any preventative measures that you might recommend maybe it is going to one of these specialists that will test them. What might you recommend?
I suppose one of the things that I would say up front is to always be searching for the truth. And so many times, if we have some kind of odd symptom or something like that, well, I'm afraid of what the answer might be, so I'm not going to get that checked out. Or just this basic fear of, oh, if I don't check for something, maybe it won't be there. And then, if you do find out that, oh, something's really wrong, to not be afraid, not to have that fear swamp over you, because the fear itself can drive the growth of cancer. They've proved that just being afraid, and Dr. Manzo will talk about that, in this whole stuff that happened, in 2020, and, all that was fear-based, and this actually gets your body in a state where it can't handle basic functions because you're afraid, and therefore it can't handle things like cancer. So number one, be aware of your body as best you can. If there's anything that's bizarre, note it, but don't be afraid of it. Because my symptoms, they were just weird. I had no clue, and I didn't trust regular doctors. So I didn't have one that I really trusted to want to go to. So, but if I were to reverse the thing and say, okay, if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, what would I do differently the minute that I noticed an oddball symptom? I probably would have sought out someone that has the bioenergetic testing, like a Quest 4, just to run that kind of a scan, find out what the body says it needs, find out how it says that it's out of balance. It doesn't diagnose anything. It just says, well, your body is out of balance here. It thinks that it would like something different. And you don't necessarily have to actually go to the doctor. Like I said, my doctor, he's been able to do everything, pretty much remotely. I was able to send in DNA samples, hair, fingernails, saliva, urine, and the scan is able to be done on all of that. And all it does is just say, well, this is where your body is out of balance. This is where it needs to come into balance. And quite honestly, you don't need a diagnosis. You don't need to put a name to it. Pretty much the medical establishment has just put a name next to a collection of symptoms. They name it that, and then they tell you that, oh, you can't cure that without one of our approved drugs, chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. We have said that once we name this collection of symptoms, then you can't cure that except with our stuff. And this is the reason why, you can't cure this or that. You've got the FDA disclaimers on everything saying this is not meant to, prevent, diagnose, or treat any disease. Well, yes, because they have put a disease name next to these sets of symptoms, and we use that for communication purposes. But so to say I had cancer, well, yeah, Susan, you had a bunch of aberrant cells that went nuts, created chaos in your body, glommed onto each other like magnets when they shouldn't have. They needed to be separated out so that they have space between them. But that's a whole lot harder to say than just the word cancer, because that kind of covers it. But yeah, it's really just the body screwed up and it was unbalanced and you need to get it back in balance. And so, yeah, I would say that one of the easiest things to do is find a doctor that does some of this bioenergetic scans, and just kind of get a biofeedback type. I don't know if that's quite the right word scientifically to say what it does, but just have the body say whether it's in balance or not. And then once you know how to get it in balance, then keep after it. And then theoretically, you would never get sick. Your body would always handle everything. And the unfortunate part of that is that usually the people that are not sick are the ones that figure, I'm doing everything right. I don't have anything to worry about. And that was kind of my case. I was never sick. I was never sick until this came on. I say never sick. I didn't ever miss a day of work because I was sick, shall we say it that way. Yeah, I had little symptoms here and there. And Dr. Shamsuddin, he's the author of the book IP6. I don't know if it's Medicine for the New Millennium. But anyway, he wrote a book on IP6, which is one that Dr. Monzo talks about, extensively, because it helps the body regulate regulate the iron and the copper. But that author, and I've talked to him in person, he says that in order for cancer to come up, you need not just one thing to happen, but you need 3 things. So if you've got one thing, the body's usually able to, figure out how to handle that. You got 2 things and the body says, oh, you're making it hard on me, but I think I can still squash that cancer down. You get 3 things and the body says, you're messing my system up here. I just can't do this. And so, yeah, it's not like you're just going to get cancer off of one thing. But when your body is run down, you're not eating right, you've got, too much iron running around in your tissues and not in your blood, all those things that Dr. Monzo tells about, then cancer has a way of just getting in there, and the body says, oh, I can't handle this.
Does he in the book, does he specify what those 3 things are?
Oh yeah, it's individual to individual.
It could vary from individual to individual.
Yeah, because like, for example,
okay.
I had a plantar wart. I got that probably from the showers when I was in the dormitory, and I had a plantar wart on the bottom of my foot. Well, that is HPV, the human papilloma virus. Sure, I got rid of that wart, but was that virus still in my system in order to eventually, 20 or 30 years later, get somewhere where the body couldn't handle it, and then that came out as a cancer later? Was my exposure to glyphosates, which they're saying, that has a lot to do with lymph cancers now, was my exposure to glyphosate something that made it so that it made the body unable to handle things in a particular way? Because after my exposure to Roundup glyphosate, yeah, I had more trouble with bloating and itchy spots and weird things that were like that. But it didn't kill me, it's just weird symptoms. But hey, what if the HPV, plantar wart virus that I had on my foot, maybe it did combine with the, problem with the glyphosate, which then, hey, the 3 years before I got my cancer were intensely emotionally traumatic because of the financial situation that Azure was in, and I was trying to handle that. So you have 3 years of an emotional problem, stress, stress to the max, people, calling you up and yelling at you every day. Well, any one of those by themselves wouldn't have caused it. You can endure stress all day long, but not if you are compromised by the glyphosate, which maybe had something to do with the virus that you got in your foot when you were, in the dorm. It doesn't take just one thing. It takes 3. And in your life, it may be totally different. I've also heard that, some of the stuff that they put in the end of those pointy things that they put in here, some of the stuff that they put in there actually causes these things to come out in you later. And that's part of the reason why there's a question of why so many young people, younger than 50, are ending up with all of these terrible cancers. And yet people that are older than 50 aren't getting them. Well, those things that you get right here when you're a child, those may just come out, and maybe that's the kind of thing that is driving a bunch of these. And I had some of those when I was a child. Maybe that was an influential factor also. I haven't had any, since then, but your parents are trying to do the best they can, doing what they're told and whatnot. And yet maybe that is why there is just so many, because like when I was in Invita, I got to know a lot of the other cancer patients there. There were, in the room with me, there were 3 girls that were all Instagram friends. They were all in their 30s. They all had colorectal cancers. They all went to Invita. They all mostly got well-ish, but none of them survived. That's partly why, here at, with Azure Standard and with David, we started working with Invita on being able to help people find organic food after they leave Invita, because, hey, all of the non-organic food that's out there is sprayed, it's GMO, it's all the things that non-organic has with it. It's got the glyphosates and, all this stuff. And so if a person, leaves Invita and they try to go home and do things right and eat right, but maybe they don't have access to good food. Maybe they didn't have, access to the supplements and whatnot. So we're trying to work with Invita to help people find good food later. But yeah, the question of, is there a reason why more and more and more young people are getting sick with these terminal cancers that seem to be, well, I think they've been dubbed turbo, because they're excessive and they're aggressive, and it's hitting younger people. And there's whole groups of people, there's conferences now going on, how do we solve this? But yeah, if it is, because one of those 3 factors is perhaps, what got poked here, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it seems like I've heard so many stories about people getting over cancer and then it comes back, and it seems like, at least with food and nutrition, if you can solve that part, make sure it's not going to come back that way. I know there's a bunch of other toxins that surround us, but at least you can eliminate that one, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is kind of a rough analogy, but it's like, mold on cheese. If you've got the cheese and you cut the mold off, well, your cheese is mold free, right? Well, somehow that mold comes right back. So that's where you have to change. You have to change the cheese. You have to do something different to make it so that it doesn't want to grow that cancer anymore. And that's where, yeah. But, eating well, if you're out of balance and your body has become out of balance so that it's sick, if you go to eating right, eating balanced, you're still out of balance. And that's where those supplements come back in to kind of fill in this gap so that you can get back to just, being able to, eat good food. But the nutrition in the food nowadays, that's part of the reason why regenerative farming and organic farming is becoming so important, and people are realizing it, is because the nutrition in the food that's grown, even if it's grown without pesticides, the nutrition just isn't there like it used to be. So it's hard to just eat normal food and you're still going to be at a deficit because it doesn't contain all of the nutrition that you need. And that's what the supplementation does, is, bring the balance back.
So where is the best place for people to find you, and or maybe people don't know about AzureWell? Can you tell them where to find these, at least some of these supplements?
So AzureWell, our website for the AzureWell brand is AzureLivingWell.com. And that's a website that has a lot of information. We're growing that website. Azure Standard, AzureStandard.com, so AZURE standard.com, is the food distribution company that founded all of this, and AzureWell is a sub-brand. And we sell everything from AzureWell within Azure Standard. There's also a lot of other stuff there too. And then we have a YouTube channel at AzureWell that we're putting up all of our podcasts. There's also, I've done a video with Kimberly Stelzer talking about her dad's experience with stage 4 prostate cancer, going to Invita, having it, be declared gone. He went home, he lived for a year, but he went back to all of his old ways of eating out fast food and drinking soda pop and back into his own stressful environment. And he died a year later. And so it's kind of together, Kimberly Stelzer and I have kind of experienced both. When you think you're well again, then what do you do? And she says she's pretty sure that her dad would like everyone to know, if he were still here, to take a different path than he did, afterwards, because just because you're proclaimed cancer-free or no evidence of disease doesn't mean that you can sit on your laurels and not keep working at it. You've got to keep after it. But yeah, so some of those videos are available on YouTube at AzureWell is the handle for that. But so far, those are the places.
Would you like to say anything else to anyone who might be in that same circumstance you were? Maybe someone who's realizing that they may have a tumor or something like this.
I would say that, number one of the things that the Bible says over and over and over, I think somebody says this like 365 times or something, is fear not. And that, I would say, is the number one thing. Don't be afraid. As long as there's life, there's hope. Our Savior died in your place, and he wants you to live. And I think he has a purpose for all of us. And I would say that if you don't fear, you make sure to ask Yah into your life, and make sure that at whatever point you know that you are in his care, doing his will. That's the only thing that's important. He will then guide you and lead you to what you need to do according to his plan. And I'm just hopeful that my story can help other people say, aha, this is a clue I needed. And I've just been expecting that. That's why Yah brought me here and put me through this, is so that there's somebody out there that needs to hear this and needs to know that Yah really does care for them, and that he has made a path, and that if we do essentially follow his law, and what I mean by that is not just not sinning or not going against the written word in the Torah, but as Dr. Manzo has pointed out, Yah's law goes all the way to the laws that he put in place at creation, and that includes the law of physics, which a lot of this stuff having to do with cancer and whatnot, and how your body resonates, and how the chemicals resonate in you, and how what you eat matters because it changes your resonant frequency and all this stuff. All of those laws of physics that are even outside of what's written in the Bible, you've got to follow those laws, because it's like you wouldn't go step out in front of a bus on purpose, because that would be defying a law of physics. God set that law out there that, hey, if you step in front of this bus, the laws of physics are going to make it so that, this is going to happen to you. And for us to go against the laws of physics by, taking in things to our bodies that really don't belong there, that he didn't design to be there, foods that are not food, things that he didn't design that are just not food. If you're defying his laws, even in that aspect, you're going to pay for it. You're going to get sick. There's going to be a problem. So a lot of these laws that are written in the Torah, they have their roots in real laws of physics and things like that, where he's trying to tell us, if you follow my ways completely, you will be able to be healthy. And so it's just a matter of teaching us that. And I'm hoping I'm learning enough.
I think that's very encouraging. And your whole story is very encouraging to me, and I think especially anyone that might be in one of those stages that you were in. Thank you for sharing it.
So many people are afraid to say the word cancer. And I don't think we need to be afraid to say it. We just need to know the truth. The way, the truth, the life. And we need to know all three. We need to know the way in which we should go. We need to know the truth, not shy away from it. And we will have life. And our Savior, he did all that for us. He did that on the cross. One of my favorite things to think about is, I know it's somewhat controversial for some, but to me, the story of the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium in Oviedo, that whole story of those two things, those two cloths together, illustrating that Yasha, my Savior, did die for me, and he rose with such great power that cloth demonstrates it. That's been something that has been a real faith builder for me. So that when I was going through this, I'm like, he did all that. He's got that kind of power to raise from the dead. The story of Lazarus, these things are very real. They did happen. And they're the kind of things that when you're in your darkest hour, you're like, God did that for Lazarus. And my Savior, by proof with the not just the Shroud of Turin, but you put the Sudarium of Oviedo in there with it. That the combination of those two together, it's like two witnesses. He did die for your sins, and he didn't just die for your sins. He actually raised from the dead for you. And he took your punishment for you so that you don't have to take it. He did that in your stead. He did that instead of me.
What is the Sudarium of
Oviedo?
Yeah, Oviedo. I've never heard of this. I've heard of
So you've heard of the Shroud of Turin, right? The Shroud of Turin is this linen cloth that is it kind of, it's like a it wraps around the body of Christ, basically. And his body was in the middle. This is what he was, laid in the tomb with. And on that cloth is a 3D imprint of the body of Christ. So you can see the front and back, and you can see, I'm saying it's the body of Christ. People still argue it, but hey, it is of a man that's approximately the right height, that has all the markings on his back that he was whipped. It shows a puncture in his side. It shows the blood coming down, and it shows where the holes for the nails were. It shows the blood spots, where the crown of thorns was. It shows, the feet, and it's a 3D picture. Whoa. That they cannot produce in modern stuff. They don't know how to produce this, and this was definitely of a crucified man. So there's that cloth that a lot of people do believe that is Christ's burial cloth. And the disciples did, take that and use it as a relic, and they took it with them and stuff like this. And that's where we get the pictures of Yasha, that they have, where he looks like he's kind of, got a long beard and these big eyes and stuff like that. Well, the reason why they think that these artistic renditions of it make it look like he had big eyes is because this photograph, kind of like a negative on there, he had coins on his eyes. And so, of course, when they looked at this, they didn't realize that they were coins. It just looks like he has big eyes. That's the reason why all these, older pictures of him, older drawings, he looks kind of weird. It's because they were looking at this. And it's after this that they started showing pictures of what Yasha actually looked like. So then the sudarium is the cloth that was over his head. And it's, when you read in the book of John that there was, the cloth and then the napkin that was set aside, it is that napkin that was over his head. So when they took him off the cross, they put this cloth, it's a linen cloth that's not as high quality as the other one. They put this cloth over his head, had a knot in the top, and they kind of pinned it to his head to cover it, and they're able from that cloth to match it up exactly with what's on the Shroud of Turin, so that the face and mouth and everything, all of those imprints of where the blood was and everything, they match on the two cloths.
Whoa.
And it shows all of the blood. They've tested the blood to see what blood was shed in life versus what was, shed after death. There's actually what they have called pleural edema, which when they took him off the cross and probably put him on a downhill slope later, that fluid came out of his mouth and it got onto this cloth that basically his whole head was covered with. And this cloth even still has some of the folds in it from where they made a knot in the top, And so when they took him in the tomb, laid him in this other cloth, they took that cloth, just plucked it off of his head and threw it over in the corner. And that is what they call a sudarium. Sudarium means sweat cloth. And evidently it was just something that, they normally would have at a place like that. But yeah, after he was crucified, put that over his head. Even while he was on the cross, the video that I was watching about it had a remake of this is how they would have put that cloth on him, where they would have pinned it, how they took it off for part of the journey, taking him down off the cross. They're able to do a timeline of it. But those two cloths together, the information there, it's just a faith builder beyond anything. And then when you study where these cloths went in the history of, they went from this place to that place and whatnot, you see that this is partly what helped probably Christianity in general to believe that this man did die and did raise from the dead. And then you've got all these disciples that are saying, hey, yeah, we saw this really happened, and we've got this proof.
That's great.
So
that's beautiful too. Would you like to add anything else at all to anyone out there about your story or anything at all?
I guess the only other thing besides just thanking my Savior for me, being here and giving me this opportunity to continue to be his servant. I would not be here if it wasn't for all of the people that took part of their life to spend with me, to help me. My coworkers, that one came and spent, 5 or 6 weeks with me. Other ones came and, spent several weeks. The enormous outpouring of generosity and help and love and care. And a lot of people don't want to accept help because it feels, demeaning. And, people a lot of talk about the Bible verse, it is better to give than to receive. And so, I don't want to have to receive because I want to be the one giving. But realizing that sometimes when you are in need and you let other people know that you're in need and they're able to help you, you're actually helping them to get a blessing because they're able to help you. So by not asking for help when you need it, you're depriving them of a blessing. And so I would just say that the other thing is just thank you for all the people who helped me that I have. Some of them I've been able to thank. Other people I could never thank because I don't even know who they are. The EMT people that, showed up here or there, I have no idea who they are. I just know that they helped save my life. And all I can do is kind of pay it forward. Whenever I can do something nice for someone else, it's to a certain degree in repayment for what someone did for me. And that's kind of what I feel like sharing my story does. It kind of makes it so that I can help other people on the front end. I can help people even though I can't go back and do something nice for the very people that helped me, because some of them I don't even know who they are.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share it with us.
Glad to do it. Glad you're doing what you're doing to be the connector so that people can hear other people's stories on your podcast. I think that's fabulous.
It is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I created a Patreon so I could kind of help support this thing. But what it has morphed into is a incredibly fun once a month digital gathering where we all the patrons and I get together and talk about the Torah, talk about our lives, talk about questions we might have, problems we're running into. And so if that sounds like something you are interested in, or if you just want to support the podcast, then join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/thelifewithluke.